In January 2024, a disturbing observation was made in Florida's Lower Keys. Jenny Stovic witnessed a small-toothed sawfish displaying highly unusual behavior, flapping erratically within the mangroves. This sighting was not an isolated incident. Just 5 days later, the sawfish was found dead. This event highlighted a growing crisis that had been unfolding since November of the previous year. Reports had been increasing across Florida of these normally placid fish exhibiting strange actions, writhing uncontrollably and swimming in disoriented circles before descending to the seabed, often never seen again. The question on everyone's mind was, what was causing this? To understand the gravity of the situation, it's helpful to know a bit about sawfish. There are 5 distinct species: dwarf, large tooth, green, knife tooth, and small tooth. All are large marine animals, with some species capable of reaching an impressive 23 feet in length, longer than many great white sharks. Their defining feature is the large, blade-like rostrum, which they use for sensing and stunning prey, as well as for defense against predators such as sharks and crocodiles. However, in early 2024, the small-toothed sawfish in the Florida Keys faced a threat far more insidious than natural predators. By July of that year, over 100 reports detailed sawfish thrashing abnormally in the water, and tragically, 54 of these incidents resulted in confirmed deaths. Scientists suspected the actual death toll could be significantly higher, as deceased sawfish typically sink to the ocean floor, making comprehensive counts difficult. These mysterious deaths occurred at a particularly devastating time for the species. Small-toothed sawfish are critically endangered, with estimates suggesting only around 450 breeding females remained in the wild. Human activities, primarily accidental capture in fishing nets and extensive habitat destruction, have severely depleted their populations. Consequently, sawfish became the first fish species to gain protection under the USA's Endangered Species Act in 2004. Conservation measures had led to some recovery in their numbers, making this sudden die-off even more alarming. The crisis extended beyond sawfish. Beginning in the fall of 2023, divers and fishermen observed similar erratic behavior in approximately 40 other fish species, including snapper, snook, and grouper, before they too perished. The situation escalated, resembling a localized fish apocalypse. The impact rippled through the human community as well. Health officials issued warnings, advising Florida residents against consuming any fish caught in waters where affected animals had been found. Simultaneously, fishing guides experienced cancellations from concerned tourists, damaging local livelihoods. Amidst the growing panic, the underlying cause remained unknown. By April 2024, the situation demanded urgent action. Scientists initiated an emergency effort focused on aiding the endangered small-toothed sawfish. Citizens were urged to report any sightings of spinning or distressed marine animals to a dedicated Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation hotline. When a report came in, response teams would attempt to locate and capture the affected sawfish, take measurements and blood samples, and tag the animal for future tracking should it survive. The first formal rescue operation took place on April 5th, targeting an 11-foot sawfish exhibiting symptoms in Cudjoe Bay. The ailing fish was transported to the Mote Marine Laboratory in Sarasota for treatment and observation, with hopes of eventual release. Despite receiving round-the-clock care and showing initial signs of improvement, the sawfish's condition deteriorated, and it died 20 days after its rescue. This mass mortality event, affecting a critically endangered species on such a scale, was described as unprecedented in recorded history. In response, the state of Florida allocated $2 million in July to fund research into the cause. The pressure mounted significantly on the scientific community to quickly unravel the mystery behind these widespread deaths. As one ecologist, Ross B., described it, the enigma felt like having a final exam you forgot about and never studied before, and you have 2 hours to learn everything. To tackle this daunting challenge, scientists dove into the heart of the affected area in the Keys. They meticulously collected samples of water and marine plants, analyzing a wide range of parameters, including oxygen levels, pH, temperature, bacteria, potential pollutants, and various chemicals. Despite this painstaking research, the initial findings were inconclusive. nothing definitively explained the bizarre behavior and subsequent deaths. However, this lack of a single smoking gun didn't mean there were no leads. Several compelling theories began to emerge. One of the primary suspects was a phenomenon known as red tide. This natural event occurs when specific types of algae experience explosive growth, forming blooms that can produce toxins harmful to marine life. Contrary to the name, these blooms, involving over 300 different algae species, can tint the water various colors, including green, orange, or red. Crucially, the Gulf of Mexico, adjacent to the Florida Keys, is home to a toxic algae species called Karenia brevis. While typically present in low concentrations, K. brevis can flourish rapidly when conditions like water temperature, nutrient levels, and wind patterns align. This proliferation is dangerous because the algae produce brevetoxin, a potent neurotoxin. Scientists hypothesized that exposure to brevetoxin could damage the nerve cells of sawfish and other species, potentially causing the loss of coordination and the characteristic spinning behavior observed before death. While red tides are natural occurrences, with evidence suggesting indigenous populations were aware of them long ago, their frequency and severity have increased alarmingly in recent years across North America. This trend is linked to warming sea temperatures driven by climate change, and crucially, to a process called eutrophication. Eutrophication happens when excess nutrients, often from agricultural fertilizer runoff or wastewater, enter aquatic ecosystems. These nutrients act like fertilizer for algae, causing massive blooms. This excessive growth depletes dissolved oxygen in the water, vital for fish survival. Furthermore, when these algae die and decompose, they release carbon dioxide, lowering the water's pH and contributing to ocean acidification. Disturbingly, studies indicate that around 65% of waterways in the United States have suffered harm from eutrophication. The devastating impact of these conditions was starkly illustrated by the recent plight of Florida's manatees. In 2021, over 1,000 of these gentle mammals died. Fertilizer runoff and wastewater had fueled algal blooms in their lagoon habitats. These blooms blocked sunlight, killing the seagrass that manatees rely on for food. The problem persisted, and in 2023, the same year the unusual fish behaviors began intensifying, an additional 77,000 acres of vital seagrass were lost to eutrophication, leaving many manatees facing starvation. Similar environmental pressures, driven by changing conditions, were implicated thousands of miles away. In early 2024, walkers in Kaiiwi, New Zealand, discovered approximately 3,500 dead juvenile eels known as elvers along a stream. These eels migrate upstream between late November and early March, requiring healthy water flow and temperatures between 60 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Investigators found algae in the water, indicating unusually warm temperatures, likely linked to climate change. Furthermore, much of the stream had minimal or no flow. This combination proved lethal. Lower stream flow reduces oxygen and concentrates toxins, effects made worse by rising water temperatures and associated algal blooms. While drastically reduced water flow isn't the primary issue in the vast Gulf of Mexico, the factors of rising water temperatures and the potential for large-scale nutrient-fueled algal blooms remained highly relevant to the sawfish mystery. This line of investigation gained further support from an astonishing discovery made by paleontologists back in 2010. That year, they unearthed Cerro Balena, Whale Hill, in Chile's Atacama Desert, a remarkable graveyard of prehistoric sea creatures dating back 5 to 11 million years to the late Miocene epoch. After a year of excavation through 4 distinct layers of rock, they uncovered fossils from 10 different marine species. This site holds the densest accumulation of extinct marine mammal fossils found anywhere in the world, featuring the skeletons of over 40 large baleen whales. Among the more unusual discoveries were large bear-sized aquatic sloths and a peculiar walrus whale, complete with a tusk over 4 feet long. What proved most intriguing about the Cerro Balena find, particularly in relation to the Florida mystery, were strange orange-colored patches observed on many of the fossilized bones. Scientists suspect these patches could be the mineralized remnants of toxic algae mats. The prevailing theory suggests that harmful algal blooms likely poisoned these ancient marine animals, either after they consumed contaminated prey or inhaled the airborne toxins near the blooms. Their carcasses would have then sunk to the seabed, eventually being buried and preserved in sediment. Crucially, the fossils were found in 4 distinct layers, indicating that similar mass poisoning events occurred repeatedly at this location over a span of approximately 10,000 to 16,000 years. This prehistoric evidence demonstrates that toxic algae have been responsible for large-scale marine die-offs for millions of years, lending significant weight to the theory that they could be involved in the recent Florida events. Bringing the focus back to the afflicted sawfish and other marine life in Florida, Dr. Michael Parsons from Florida Gulf Coast University is among the experts who strongly suspect that toxins produced by algae are a key factor in the ongoing crisis. This hypothesis is further bolstered by observations that some affected fish began to show signs of recovery after being carefully relocated from the affected areas into tanks containing clean, untainted water. Scientists noted that some affected fish would revert to normal behavior, sometimes within just 25 minutes, correlating with tidal shifts that might alter toxin concentrations near the shore. Furthermore, fish often recovered if moved away from the deeper waters near the seabed, precisely where bottom-dwelling sawfish spend their time and would likely encounter the highest concentrations of any accumulated toxins. However, water sample analysis presented a twist. While levels of Carenia brevis, the algae typically associated with Gulf Coast red tides, weren't found to be exceptionally high, scientists detected startling concentrations of another type of algae called Gambia discus. Normally, 2 pints of seawater from the Keys might contain 30 to 40 Gambia discus cells. The recent samples showed levels around a gargantuan 1,000 cells. This was significant because while often benign, certain species of Gambia discus produce potent neurotoxins known as ciguatoxins. These complex toxins can accumulate in the food web, particularly in coral reef fish. In humans, consuming fish contaminated with these toxins causes a serious illness called ciguatera, marked by severe gastrointestinal distress and neurological symptoms. Scientists theorized that fish exposed to high levels might suffer similar neurological problems like the hyperactivity, twitching, and ultimately, the disoriented death spirals observed in the sawfish and other species. Adding fuel to this theory, ciguatoxin prevalence is often higher in areas where coral reefs have suffered environmental damage, such as from warming waters or pollution. A historical example occurred during World War II, when bombing damaged reefs across Pacific Islands, leading to stress-induced ciguatera outbreaks that sickened many civilians. While bombs weren't falling on Florida, heat certainly could have played a role. The record-breaking heat Florida experienced in the summer of 2023, with temperatures nearing 100 degrees Fahrenheit, approximately 38 degrees Celsius, could certainly have contributed to conditions favorable for Gambia discus blooms. However, this theory encountered a significant challenge. If ciguatoxins were solely responsible and present in high enough concentrations to kill robust animals like sawfish, widespread cases of ciguatera in humans consuming local fish would likely have been reported. This was not the case on a large scale. Instead, laboratory tests revealed a more complex picture, a cocktail of various toxins produced by several different species of algae coexisting in the water. This made pinpointing the precise blame on any single toxin or species incredibly difficult, a real head-scratcher for researchers. Thankfully, reports indicated that the mass die-offs seem to have largely subsided since July 2024, although scientists remained uncertain if or when the phenomenon might return. Reflecting on the crisis, the role of human impact becomes hard to ignore. Rising water temperatures, widely attributed to climate change, likely played a significant role in allowing these potentially toxic algae to thrive, putting vulnerable species like the small-toothed sawfish, and potentially ourselves, at risk. But the sawfish calamity in Florida isn't the only alarming event impacting marine ecosystems. It turns out that sea-dwelling animals around the world have been devastated by other strange human-related causes. Among those facing increasing peril are the world's whales. While the phrase "having a whale of a time" suggests enjoyment, recent years have been anything but fun for many whale populations. Consider the distressing event in 2022, when approximately 230 pilot whales mysteriously stranded themselves on the shores of Macquarie Harbour in Tasmania, Australia. Despite rescue efforts, the vast majority perished, requiring local farmers to tow the carcasses out to sea for scavengers. This isn't an isolated tragedy. A particularly worrying trend has unfolded along North America's east coast since 2017. In this period, over 500 minke and humpback whales have been documented as seriously injured, stranded, or killed, constituting what authorities classify as an unusual mortality event, UME. Investigating the potential causes for such tragedies, some critics have pointed towards seismic surveys conducted for offshore wind farm development. These surveys use powerful sound pulses to map the seabed, leading to speculation that the resulting noise pollution severely disturbs whales, which rely heavily on sound for navigation, communication, and finding food, potentially causing them to freak out. However, scientific bodies and agencies cited in reports have largely discounted this as the primary driver for the mass strandings and deaths. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, for example, stated that their survey sound levels are typically around 220 decibels, significantly quieter than the 250 decibel seismic airguns used historically in oil and gas exploration. Furthermore, the prevailing scientific view mentioned in discussions suggests that whales, if significantly disturbed by localized noise, would more likely move away from the source rather than become fatally disoriented en masse. Instead, evidence points towards a confluence of other persistent human-related factors as more likely culprits. These include intensified marine traffic leading to often fatal ship strikes, entanglement in industrial fishing gear, including lines and nets, and the pervasive issue of ocean pollution, encompassing both large plastic debris and insidious microplastics. The shocking scale of direct plastic pollution was starkly highlighted in 2018 when a sperm whale washed ashore in Indonesia. A necropsy revealed its stomach contained over 13 pounds, nearly 6 kilograms, of plastic waste, including 115 plastic cups, 25 plastic bags, 2 flip-flops, and more than 1,000 pieces of string. It's a grim illustration of the debris accumulating in marine environments. Analyzing the specific situation within the East Coast UME from 2016 to 2023 proved challenging. Due to the immense size of the animals and logistical difficulties, only about half of the deceased whales could undergo detailed examination, necropsy. Yet, among those examined whales, a significant 40% showed clear evidence of trauma consistent with ship collisions or entanglement in fishing gear. Despite these findings, no single easily fixable cause has been identified that fully explains the overall spike in mortality across the affected species and region. This strongly suggests that a complex myriad of interconnected pressures, ship strikes, entanglement, pollution, and potentially other environmental stressors is likely responsible for these ongoing whale woes. Untangling this web of threats and finding effective solutions remains a critical challenge for marine conservation. Increasing ocean temperatures create conditions where pathogens, once limited by colder waters, can proliferate, leading to severe impacts on marine wildlife. A stark example of this occurred between 2013 and 2015 along the Atlantic coast of the United States, stretching from Florida to New York. During this devastating 2-year period, over 1,600 dead bottlenose dolphins washed ashore. However, this number is believed to represent only a fraction of the actual toll, with the total mortality estimated to be near 20,000 individuals. This event caused a catastrophic 50% reduction in the region's coastal dolphin population. Subsequent investigations identified cetacean morbillivirus, CEMV, as the primary cause. The virus was detected in 92% of the dolphins examined. CEMV, a pathogen often compared to the measles virus in humans, is known to cause severe respiratory, lung, and neurological brain infections, as well as widespread damaging skin lesions. Its increased prevalence during the outbreak has been linked to warming ocean waters along the east coast, potentially driven by climate change, which may allow the virus to thrive more readily. Transmission of CEMV occurs through various means suited to dolphin behavior. Healthy dolphins can inhale airborne viral particles exhaled by infected individuals when they surface or leap nearby, actions common during travel, hunting, and social interaction. The virus can also spread through direct contact, particularly via open skin sores. Furthermore, infected mothers can unfortunately transmit the virus to their calves during gestation. While the 2013 to 2015 event was the most severe CEMV outbreak documented for this population, it was not unprecedented. A similar large-scale mass mortality event attributed to the virus occurred between June 1987 and May 1988, resulting in the deaths of approximately 900 dolphins along the same coastline. Following such outbreaks, surviving dolphins typically develop antibodies, providing them with immunity against future infection from similar strains. The presence of these immune individuals within the population also contributes to herd immunity, reducing the overall spread of the virus by limiting transmission pathways. However, this population-level protection diminishes over time as the immune generation naturally ages and dies off. This eventually leaves subsequent generations lacking prior exposure and immunity, susceptible to the virus once more. This dynamic creates a cyclical pattern of vulnerability, allowing for potential future outbreaks when conditions become favorable for the virus. This recurring cycle highlights the complex interplay between disease, animal populations, and changing environmental conditions like ocean warming, presenting a significant challenge with no straightforward solutions. Unfortunately, dolphins are not the only marine inhabitants suffering from debilitating diseases, some potentially linked to environmental factors. Sea turtles, particularly green turtles in certain regions like US waters, face a grim affliction known as fibropapillomatosis (FP). This disease manifests as tumors, sometimes mushrooming extensively over the turtle's body, including skin, eyes, and even internal organs. The severity of FP varies, while it can be mild in some cases, and studies suggest up to 60% of affected turtles may experience tumor regression over time. For many others, it is severely debilitating. The tumors can cause blindness, obstruct movement, interfere with feeding, cause internal damage, and ultimately lead to death. FFP has been recognized since the 1800s, but it garnered significant scientific and public attention primarily in the 1980s following outbreaks observed in green turtle populations in the USA. The disease is caused by a type of herpes virus, believed to spread through direct contact between turtles or exposure to the virus in contaminated waters. Other factors, such as pollution, may also play a role in tumor development or susceptibility. Additionally, FPDNA has been found in leeches known to parasitize sea turtles, suggesting these blood feeders might act as vectors. It's observed that young sea turtles often contract FP when they migrate from the open ocean environment of their early years into shallower coastal feeding grounds for the first time. While the disease isn't fully understood, help is available for severely affected turtles, though typically only if they become stranded on land. Stranded individuals can be reported to local networks and transported to veterinary facilities where tumors may be surgically removed and other supportive care provided. While this intervention can save individual animals, effective large-scale treatment for the broader population remains elusive due to the complexities of the disease and the marine environment. Shifting our focus from the creatures below the waves to those soaring above, seabirds also face grave threats. The United Kingdom holds particular importance for several species, hosting most of the world's nesting great skuas and roughly half of the global northern gannet population. In 2021, these populations were hit hard by a worldwide outbreak of H5N1, a highly pathogenic variant of avian influenza, bird flu. The results were calamitous. Estimates suggest the outbreak wiped out 75% of the great skua population and 25% of the northern gannets across the UK. By June 2022, Bass Rock in Scotland, typically whitened by millions of nesting gannets, had reportedly lost a quarter of its birds to the disease. Affected birds suffer symptoms including lack of appetite, respiratory distress, and diarrhea before succumbing to the illness. Some research suggests potential links between changing climate patterns and the spread or severity of such outbreaks. For example, warmer winters and earlier springs in North America might favor certain bacteria, while wetter conditions could potentially prolong the survival of the flu virus in bird droppings or contaminated water. It's also important to note that avian flu variants like H5N1 can pose a risk to other animals, including humans. On a more positive note, observations in the summer of 2023 suggested some recovery in the gannet population. Intriguingly, many survivors could be identified by a peculiar change. Their normally bright blue irises had turned black, a phenomenon scientists are still working to understand. Finally, even commercially important species like salmon face significant biological challenges, particularly in aquaculture settings. Farmed salmon populations are currently plagued by parasites called sea lice. These tiny crustaceans, less than 0.3 inches long, attach themselves to the salmon, feeding on their mucus, skin, and blood. This parasitism coats the fish in sores, weakens their immune systems, and in severe infestations can lead to mass die-offs. The proliferation of sea lice is exacerbated by farming conditions. In the vast ocean, sea lice larvae have a difficult time finding a host. However, in densely populated fish farms where salmon are crowded together, larvae can easily find and infest fish, and the parasites spread rapidly. This presents a major economic problem for farmers, as infected fish often cannot be sold. Chemical treatments exist, but they can have drawbacks like stunting salmon growth, and lice have developed resistance to the most commonly used chemicals. Since sea lice larvae tend to congregate near the water's surface, keeping fish deeper can help. However, salmon need access to the surface to regulate buoyancy by refilling their swim bladders. To address this, farmers have developed snorkel cages. These cages feature netting roofs submerged 30 to 65 feet deep, keeping the salmon below the surface layer frequented by lice larvae. A sealed snorkel tube extends from the roof to the surface, allowing salmon to safely access air without exposure to the lice-concentrated upper water column. These cages have shown success, reducing infection rates by around 75%, though they are not a perfect solution. A significant ongoing concern is the potential for lice originating in farms to spread to wild salmon populations migrating past the enclosures. Looking across these examples, from the sawfish spinning in the Keys to stranded whales, disease-stricken dolphins and turtles, flu-ravaged seabirds, and parasite-infested salmon, a pattern of marine life under stress emerges. Many of these issues, whether toxic algal blooms potentially fueled by warming waters and nutrient runoff, direct harm from ship traffic and fishing gear, the spread of disease exacerbated by changing conditions, or the challenges of intensive aquaculture, are linked directly or indirectly to human activities and their impact on the global environment. The positive news is that awareness is growing, and solutions, ranging from conservation interventions and habitat restoration to improved management practices and technological innovations like snorkel cages, are being developed and implemented. However, the scale and interconnectedness of these challenges underscore the need for broad collective action and significant changes to mitigate our impact on the natural world. The crucial question remains whether these efforts can be scaled up and accelerated quickly enough to safeguard marine ecosystems and the remarkable life they support.